Well, hello and welcome to our January Share Faith webinar on live video streaming. We're so happy that you guys have joined us today. You're the early birds. You're like me. I'm always showing up places early. So we're actually going to get rolling here in about 2 or 3 minutes. So hang tight. Go grab some coffee or tea or toast, perhaps even an avocado, whatever you like, and we will be starting up here shortly. So looking forward to spending time with you guys. Thanks again for joining, and we will see you soon. Hello, Share Faith family. It is time to begin our webinar. We're so excited to spend some time with you today. The next guys, we've constructed this presentation to hopefully add a lot of value to your ministry. So the subject is my favorite Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. If you've not read it, I would highly recommend it. I actually thought, you know what, this webinar would be awesome if I just read them this book, because it's not a book for kids, it's a book for adults, and I think very relevant to people in ministry. So pick that one up as homework if you've not read it before. But when it comes to the subject matter of our conversation today, that's really what the goal is. We're going to be spending some time today hopefully talking back and forth. There will be a couple different times where I'm going to be presenting things about live streaming, but at the end of the day, I would love for you guys to interact. So there is a chat box beneath the player where you guys can type in questions. There's also an email address, webinars@boxcast.com. Feel free to send any sort of questions that you have about live streaming. And again, this is a broad subject, so it could be highly technical questions or very ministry-focused questions. And then we're going to have a couple times where we're going to deep dive into those issues that you guys bring up. So again, we want this to be all about you guys. This is a webinar, but it's also a discussion. So the two bits of content that we're going to be diving into, first of all, we're going to be talking about the where of live streaming. Where are the places that we can reach, and who are the folks that we can touch, not only locally, but globally as well. And then the second part is how do we live stream? Some of us have never done that before, and it might seem like an intimidating subject, but we really want to make this informative so that you guys can kind of get past the question of how in the world am I going to do this, and kind of practically get to a point where you could implement it. And then finally, if you hang with us till the end, then we are going to dive into a special promotion that we have for you guys today, not only for Share Faith churches, but for you guys who've signed up for the webinar. So without further ado, let's just dive right into it. And really, when it comes to thinking about live streaming, I think I have a few initial thoughts that will hopefully kind of set the tone of what we're talking about. Actually, last week, Zach from Share Faith Academy did a webinar on websites, and one of the things that he mentioned was just that we all have different goals. And he actually asked during the webinar, what are some of the goals that you guys have for your website? And here are a couple of the responses during that webinar. Someone just responded to go live, as if for the first time. Some other people responded by saying things like, we want to increase our reach through streaming and video in general. So, so some of you guys have this goal of going live for the first time. Some of you have already been there and you want to increase your reach and try to be more effective with what you already do. That's great. We're all in different places, and that's okay. Some of us are looking to really improve our attraction and work on our assimilation to make sure that we can maximize kind of the intake of people from our community into our doors on Sunday morning. And another of you guys might be focused more on discipleship of believers that have been believers for a long time. So we're going to touch on all these points regardless of where you guys are at. And then one thing to tell you a little bit about myself is that I have been working at Boxcast for 5 years now. I actually was an associate pastor at a church on the west side of Cleveland here for a number of years. My passion is discipleship. So I love the church. I serve in my local church. But over the last 5 years, I've had the privilege of traveling around the country and talking with pastors in multiple different roles and volunteers in other roles. And I think one of the commonalities of a lot of conversations that people have, and the reason why we're doing this webinar today, is because a lot of churches think too small. So when it comes to thinking about the actual practical, real-life ministry impact of streaming, usually churches will come to us and say, oh, well, we really want to accomplish A or B. But outside of that, we don't know if there's really much practical ministry impact that can happen from streaming. And I think that's a really kind of narrow-minded view of what streaming can actually do in this year, 2018, in this video culture that we're in. So we're going to try to talk about some of these places that we can reach with tools like archived and live video. And these are just to name a few. Of course, there's a wide variety. But let's just hop into this list and kind of dive into beyond that A and B application of streaming, the C, D, E, and every letter of the alphabet. So one of the primary applications for streaming is just the fact that very few people in your church are going to make it to church 52 weeks out of the year. So whether their kids are at home or whether they have to go to the hospital or have to kind of stay away from folks because they're dealing with some sort of medical condition where they're not immune to sickness, there are a lot of folks in our churches that from time to time would love to make it to church, but just can't. Even the most faithful, devoted believers. So these are giving members, these are serving members, and if you can find a way so that when they're home for a week or two in a row, that they can kind of stay and keep with the continuity of the sermon series, and also hear the corporate prayer and engage in community, even when life keeps them away. That's a huge outreach, and really it affects most people in your church on a yearly basis. Beyond just the application of Sunday morning streaming, we're really happy to offer our churches unlimited streaming. And what that means is you guys can get really creative. So when it comes to those of you who have discipleship goals, we're encouraging you guys to do some sort of educational streams or training streams. So you might have a leadership development program where you might have weekly events, or even in recent years you've had recordings of video sessions where you wanted folks to take part in what it means to kind of grow in service and grow in knowledge of the Bible. So doing something with that content and with those events and putting it online for people to either watch during the event or after the fact is a really exciting, valuable piece of video content for those in your church. And you can really not only educate them, but train them to be more and more useful for the kingdom through something like video streaming. And kind of wrapping up a very local application, the reality is that there's a lot of folks in your church that have to travel. So there was a time in my life when I think one year I traveled almost 25 times. And I was going from pastor's conference to pastor's conference, which was wonderful. But I come from a background where the preaching was expositional and exegetical, and you're spending a lot of time diving into the text. And if you miss a week or two, you might kind of get behind. And so I was so glad during that year of my life to be able to tune in, even if I was gone for a weekend, and keep up with that deep diving into the Word of God. So whether it's business travel or even just vacation, if you go out of town 1 or 2 weeks a year and miss a few Sundays, it's so nice. Rather than necessarily visiting a church that you've never been before, and you might not really it may not be a good fit for you just because it's the closest one to where you're staying. It's great to be able to stay connected on those types of trips. And then, of course, there's a number of our church members, I think. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, so it gets pretty cold here in the wintertime. But if you have people in your church that travel away to warmer weather, some call those folks snowbirds, then this is a nice way for them to be able to stay connected even when they're away enjoying the sun and staying away from the snow. And of course, we can focus and really primarily choose to stream because of the impact that it can have in our local congregation. But there are some really exciting applications that some churches don't even realize apply to live video streaming with people that might even be out of state and far away. So one of those things is assimilation. This was one of the goals brought up on Zach's webinar last week on websites, to get more people, kind of attract them, be attractional, to get them involved in your church. So I don't know if you guys have moved recently, but I've moved around in the last few years. I've lived in Chicago, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And before I've moved to each of those locations, before I actually moved in, I already pretty much knew which church I was going to go to. Because nowadays, when you move to a community, especially if you have a family, you're looking for a school system, you're looking for what the community has to offer with grocery stores and parks, but especially if you're a believer, you're looking for a church that you can plug into and hopefully become part of that community and that body quickly. There's nothing as lonely as moving to a new place and not knowing anyone, especially if you're a Christian. And so being able to put content on your website every single week that's refreshing automatically, so that people can tune in either live or after the fact to see what you're like, is a comforting thing, and I think it does a great job of welcoming people into your congregation. But another thing that's really, really valuable, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about because a lot of people don't know it, when someone searches for a church and they type in your city and state into any sort of search engine, then what that search engine is doing is it's instantaneously making a snap decision and saying, okay, I'm going to provide the most valuable list of websites that apply to that city, state, and that title, a church, right? And so what that search engine is doing is it's making all these judgments on what is valuable, what makes a website valuable, and having embedded video, which means having video that actually lives on your website, available for people to tune into. That's not only posting every once in a while, but that's posting week after week after week at the same time. That shows search engines like Google that you guys are reliable and that you're providing really, really high-end video for people to include. And so what it's going to do is it's actually going to bump you up on the search engine order. So maybe you were on page 2 of Google and there's a lot of churches in your area and people aren't really finding you. Just by the fact that you guys embed video is going to significantly increase your ranking so that you're suddenly on page 1 and maybe you're option 2 and 3. And that's a fantastic way in our day and age, because of the way that people look for churches, to attract people that are moving to your community or from farther away and might be visiting. So it's a wonderful, wonderful little 3-letter abbreviation, SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization. We want to help you guys have the biggest availability to your community and people that are moving to your community as possible. When it comes to those who are seeking the faith and have not necessarily made a commitment to Jesus Christ to follow after him, maybe people used to look in books and libraries, but more and more we're transitioning to the digital age. And there are so many conversations on social media outlets, as well as even just general blog discussion boards about faith and about what it means to follow Jesus, or about the book of John or the book of Mark or the book of Genesis. And so when your church live streams and has your archives stored, then what you're doing is you are creating a place where folks can wind up on your site, even if they're from across the country or even across the world. And we've heard a lot of stories here at Boxcast about people who are earnestly seeking God, but they live in places and they come from households that are kind of hostile to the faith. And so they kind of do it in a private way and they look online. And we've heard story after story of folks that were from Muslim countries and even under persecution that have come to know Jesus through a church of 100 or 150 in Minnesota or Iowa or Idaho. And you might have never thought that type of thing could happen. But we hear the stories like that all the time. So it's exciting that God is working in people's hearts. And in our video culture, we truly can reach people for Christ, even in ways we couldn't have predicted through something like streaming. Another thing that's kind of neat about Share Faith streaming is that we have customized our features for churches. So we've tried to make, in a world of a lot of different live streaming providers that are customized for businesses, we've created a lot of ministry-specific features. And one of those is the fact that we allow churches to do multi-site streaming really affordably, because that can cost some ministries upwards of $2, $3, $4, $5, even $10,000 a month, depending on the service that you pursue. So we've made it really, really affordable for you guys to open up a new campus, whether that's 45 minutes away or even a few hours away. This is something that a lot of our churches have used in rural areas when people can't necessarily drive. So we have a really user-friendly, affordable multi-site solution. And that's another neat way that you can use something like video to stream content live and then reach people in an entirely new and exciting way. And then also, one of my favorite stories that I've heard as a pastor who told me about how he had been always trying to encourage his people to do evangelism, and a lot of them were kind of scared. And what he found was one of the most effective ways to do that was for people to just give a business card that had their church's website and say, you know what, tune in and watch the church. And these are people that might never step foot in that church's door because they're either hostile to the faith, or they're disinterested, or they're nervous, or they're shy, or they're introverted. But it has a lot lower barrier of entry to just go somewhere online and look up their site. So it's actually a form of kind of easier evangelism for your people as well. So let's kind of go to one more section. Let's move away from a local focus and focus a little bit more on people who are farther away on a global level. So most of our churches, if your church is anything like mine, supports missionaries and supports people maybe in your community, but also across the world. So we have, at our church, we've decided to kind of invest in a small select group and to invest in them heavily. And a lot of them are serving in areas where they grow pretty discouraged. There aren't actually a lot of Christians there, and some of the missionaries that we support aren't even in communities with churches. And these are the types of people that are pouring themselves out time and time again into other people, and oftentimes find themselves in the mission field rather discouraged. So one of the ways for you guys to support your missionaries is not only to financially support them, and that is by letting them tune in and be a part of your community even when they've left you and they've moved somewhere else, because missionaries need to go to church too, and they need the body of Christ to encourage them. So missionaries are often far off all around the world, scattered oftentimes in dark places, as are soldiers. So soldiers, when they're deployed, as you can imagine, and if you know some people personally, are often going to some pretty hostile areas, and maybe they don't have a lot of freedom to go even into the community if it's a very hostile area. And so they're itching for content, and they're itching for home. So if they've been sitting under the preaching of your congregation for a number of years, and if they just want to stay in touch and kind of cling to Christ even when they're in a scary place, we've heard a lot of stories, and we've actually had a lot of viewership all across the world for soldiers. So that's kind of one or two examples of just how your ministry can have even a more profound reach than you guys have thought about. Another exciting thing is that missions trips are changing. Missions trips are really expensive. I've been on a few to myself, and it took a long time to raise support to get down to Peru or the Dominican Republic or France. And so what we've actually transitioned with doing is instead of flying a team and raising thousands of dollars to go and train pastors in another part of like Central Asia, what we'll do is we will more regularly than we couldn't do in person, we'll regularly actually stream training to them, because there are so many pastors and so many Christian leaders all throughout the world that are just dying for education. There are fantastic ministries like Training Leaders International, and these will actually send people, and they're doing a great job of raising up leaders in communities that need Christian education. But you can also contribute to that effort as well through offering training to those folks. That's kind of like a new school missions trip. You're not necessarily having to raise $20,000 to go, but you can still really leave a lasting impact. And then finally, I think maybe the best thing to talk about of the places that you can go with a video ministry like live or archive streaming is wherever the Holy Spirit leads you, unsuspecting places. So oftentimes in my life, whenever I've made plans, I've wound up in some place totally different 2 years later than I thought I would be in. And that's because who knows where the Holy Spirit will lead you, and what God's plans are for you. And we usually have those churches that come to us and say, yeah, we want to reach college students, or yeah, we really want to reach people who are stuck at home and they're shut-ins. But then a few months in, we'll get emails, and people will say, wow, we didn't even know we could reach this type of person, or this type of person who really needed Christ. So it's a fantastic world that we live in that has a great need for Christ. And really, I think the conclusion of all of this, the truth about live streaming, is that you can really develop a thriving, legitimate ministry through something like streaming. You can go quite a few places, and so that's kind of where we're going to stop this first section. And again, we can dive into whatever types of questions that you guys have. So I'm going to pull up a few here just to see what you guys have been saying, because I know I've been yapping quite a bit. I do have my Master's of Divinity and a double major from a Bible college, so I practically majored in yapping away. But here are a few questions that we have. I am a really small church and only have volunteers that can help me. Will this solution work? So I absolutely love this question. This actually will kind of show that we've built our solution in a way that meets the needs of churches. We know that there are about 30, 40, sometimes even 50 or more things going on Sunday mornings at your church. Especially if you're a smaller church, you are very likely to have more tasks than you have volunteers. So the last thing that you want to do is sign yourself up for something that's going to require more work, right? Because you're already quite busy as it is and a little bit overworked. And if you're a pastor that is wearing a lot of hats and you're doing discipleship and worship and Christian education and preaching occasionally and hospital visitation, things can be overwhelming, and the last thing you want to do is become even busier, right? So what we've actually done, we run everything through this little piece of hardware right here. It's called our Boxcaster. It's actually, what's kind of neat about it is it's our 7th version of our hardware, so we're constantly improving it. We have, we've been selling it for $499 to churches, but through Share Faith, you guys get it for free, and we're happy to give you it for free because that's all that you need. You don't need a computer, you don't need software, and you're able to simply plug in your signal and connect to the internet and then broadcast automatically because there's no button on the box. So it really runs by itself, and on Sunday morning, your stream will start and it will stop, and it will post live and it will post archived. So this is meant to be something that even if you don't have a volunteer who is really great with technology, or even if you don't have another volunteer to spare, this will run by itself. So we know that streaming can be complicated, and we're trying to make it really, really easy for you guys. Another question, will Boxcast save our streams, and can we edit our streams? Yes and yes. So while you're streaming live through Share Faith and Boxcast, we're not only streaming you live, but we're preparing to post your archive after the fact. And we're doing so actually just a few seconds after your service is over. So I don't know if you guys have done archived video before, but I've heard time and time again, I've heard pastors say, well, we record our video on a camera and then we upload it later, and sometimes it gets up about 5 days after, or maybe a week after, or sometimes it doesn't get up at all, or maybe 2 weeks after. So we know that there's this big gap that we wanted to try to solve, and the way that we did that was by preparing to post your video immediately after your service is over. So we're going to store your content. We're also going to let you download it so that you can have an actual downloadable file if you wanted to create a DVD or just send that to someone else. And then as far as editing your services, a lot of churches want to stream live on Sunday morning, but they only want their sermons to be posted when it comes to archives. So what we've done is we've included a post-production trimming tool that allows you to take the long file of your entire service and cut off both sides of the start and the end that you might not want to have, and that way when someone clicks play after the fact, it goes right to the preaching of the word or right to the beginning of the music, wherever you want your service to start. And then we even have the ability for you to capture a little 2 or 3 minute clip and then push that to Facebook or Twitter or even somebody's email, so that you can remind them later on during the week of the sermon that they heard on Sunday morning. Even if they were in person, a lot of people forget what was preached on Sunday morning. So we want to come up with these creative, ministry, practical ways for your church to just continue to share your content all over the place so that people can grow closer to Christ. Let's see. How much are we allowed to stream, and how many events can we schedule? Good question, Thomas. It's unlimited. So we want you to, traditionally the model is nickel and dime you to death. That's what a lot of streaming companies have done. And if you wanted a lot of real essential features, and if you wanted to stream more events or have more viewers, then you'd have to pay more. So we have decided we're just going to have one flat rate that allows you to stream as much as you guys want. So there's no limit. You can do any type of ministry event: weddings, funerals, baptisms, worship services, prayer meetings. You can even do private streams. So if you have an elders meeting that someone can't attend because they're out of town, then you can do a private stream by invitation only and stream that as well. So honestly, we want you guys to get as creative as possible. We don't want to limit you in any way, and you can stream as much as you want. All right. We use the Share Faith sermon player for our Share Faith site. Yeah, so regardless of the website or app that you have, we're actually going to be able to embed in it. We have churches on 6 continents, and you can imagine the different website providers that we work with. So what we do with our support team is we'll actually get on the phone with our new churches, and we'll walk you through how to use everything, and we'll answer every question that you have, run a few test broadcasts, and make sure that you guys are good to go and don't have to invest too much time to get up and running. So awesome questions. If you guys have not asked questions yet and you're still in attendance, we're going to have another question time during the second part of this webinar. I'm going to dive back into a little bit more content here. But remember, webinars@boxcast.com or the chat feature below the player. I want this to be about you guys. I want this to be about what's relevant to your ministries. So feel free to ask anything. I'll even tell you what type of shampoo I'm using if you want to know that. So we'll move on, we'll press on, and thank you so much for you guys who asked questions. We're going to dive again and do a few more. let's kind of talk about the technical aspect a little bit more. So moving from the where can my stream impact people to the well, how do we stream in general? We've never done it before. It seems intimidating. It's too technical. It's expensive. It's going to take way too much work. And that is, I think, the assumption of some that if you're anything like me, I took Hebrew and I took Greek. I never took a class on technology, so maybe that's not your forte, and that's okay. I think the experience of many has been kind of like the main character in the book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. You can get so confused that you'll start into race down long, wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, towards a most useless place. And that's what a lot of people experience when they try to get up in streaming. It can be this really kind of painful process that doesn't really lead anywhere positive, and I think that can scare some folks away. So what we've tried to do is be a little bit different. Yes, streaming is complicated. There are all these things that we have to do when it comes to live video streaming. We have to acquire the video and encode it and compress it and transfer it and transcode it and deal with presentation and delivery, distribution, monetization, simulcasting, and even store it on our cloud servers. So that can sound intimidating, and maybe you guys are tech pastors and you're like, I know exactly what every one of those things mean. Maybe you felt like that was in one ear and out the other. Regardless of where you are in the scale, this is our solution. We've taken all of that and we've simplified it. So we are an end-to-end streaming solution that has fully been designed so that you guys don't have to do all of those highly technical piece part different types of things. You can just come to us and we can have a very simple option for you. So I figured what would be the best way for me to explain what Share Faith and Boxcast streaming looks like is to do it with a PowerPoint that has a balloon on it, which I already have, as well as a couple quick steps. So here we have 5 steps. And first of all, I kind of mentioned on it, this is the first part of Share Faith streaming. No computer and no volunteer. So we are not requiring you to go out and purchase a computer because computers, quite frankly, don't do a great job streaming. So that's why we've designed our hardware to be really, really easy. And again, I'll just kind of show this to you guys. But you can see it's about the size of my shirt pocket here of an iPhone, and it has a couple inputs for your video and audio, as well as for your internet and power. So no buttons to actually stream it, and it's meant to be really, really volunteer free and effort free in that manner. So the inputs that you will have to bring us is you have to bring us the internet. We need the internet to stream, but we actually have built a really nice back-end server infrastructure that even if you have a low internet upload speed, you can still stream with us. So even if you only have 1 megabit per second upload, then you can still broadcast with us, and that's pretty fantastic because usually the requirement is 3-4 times that, and a lot of churches in rural areas might only have a few megs up. So if you want to test your upload speed, go to speedtest.net, and you can run a quick test that'll tell you where you're at. And most residential internet options for folks in your house will be about 3, 4, 5 megs up, even higher than that. So we rarely run into a church that has too little of an upload speed to stream with us. So that's the internet requirement. Other than that, you bring us the audio and you bring us the video. So if you have a soundboard that you're already running your microphones to, chances are you're going to have a number of different outputs from that soundboard. So we can take a quick output from that and then plug your microphones directly into our box. And we can do that right here through either HDMI or RCA composite. And then as far as your video signal, you have those same 2 inputs as options. You can take a single camera and plug it right in, or if you have something more advanced like a video switcher, you can plug that in as well. So when Sunday morning rolls around, that little box will turn on by itself, and you'll be able to broadcast right from your microphones and right from your camera setup, and that's going to go upload to the internet, and we handle it from there. So it's quite an easy plug and play option for you guys. This is an exciting part. I'm excited to talk to you about all these little unofficial abbreviations because I couldn't fit them all into one little line because we have so many different options. But we want people to be able to view your content at as many places as possible. So we're not only embedding in your ShareFaith website, we're not only embedding in your ShareFaith app, but if your church has a Facebook account, if you have a YouTube account, if you want to set up an Apple TV or Roku integration, if you have a Twitter account, and if you have a Vimeo account, then we have ways for you to simulcast or send your archives to those locations. So that way when your box lights up and turns on Sunday morning, then it's going to send your stream live, not only to your website, not only to your app, but also to Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Apple TV, and Roku as well, so that people, regardless of what their viewing preference is, you're going to be able to reach as many people as possible in that way. So those simulcasts are set up in default ways that are really automated. So you're not going to have to log into every one of them every Sunday. It's actually quite simple. Actually, the average church spends about 5 minutes every week into actually setting up their stream, and that's usually just typing in the title of the sermon that week and making sure that everything's turned on. So it's not this laborious process to kind of integrate all these accounts. We've done it in an automated way for you. And then another thing about our streaming solution is, as I mentioned before a few times, we're so church specific. So our company was founded by a worship leader. We've got guys who are on staff with Young Life. We have a couple worship leaders on staff. We have a heart for the church. And so you'll find these church specific features like analytics or post-production sermon trimming or church multi-site broadcasting. And you'll find those included in your package. And then of course it's unlimited. So you can stream as much as you would like. And finally, maybe this is going to be the most exciting point for some of you guys who are like, oh man, I've never done this before. I'm a little scared. Can you help me? Can you be there to hold my hand through the process? And the answer is yes. So we're located here. Our headquarters is in Cleveland, Ohio. So we're on Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to use that as the example. But we are actually available 7 days a week for you guys, 9 a.m. and then also 2 hours earlier on Sunday morning. So anytime you have a question, we will either reach out proactively to you because we have people monitoring all of our broadcasts. But if you just have a random question or if something goes wrong, then you can give a call in and talk to a real person, and we'll help you out there. So we're happy to do that. And I actually couldn't fit all of my steps into 5. So I added a 6th one because I thought that it was relevant. It's actually an exciting one that through ShareFaith we are actually giving our highest priced discounted plan out there to anybody. So if you want our hardware for free, you have to go through ShareFaith. You couldn't just call us and get it. We have, for all of our premium church features, our price is $220 a month for unlimited streaming and all of the things that we've been talking about and more. We've lowered that down to just $99 for you. So again, that's a price that you can't get anywhere else. We're doing it exclusively for you guys because we love working with ShareFaith churches so much. So that's something that I think is noteworthy. We're trying to get you guys the ability to do this for less than a lot of families are paying on a monthly cell phone bill. So these are just 5 quick, very quick, I should say, overview topics of what it takes to get up and streaming with ShareFaith. I would love to dive in deeper. So whether you guys have questions about ministry applications specifically, if they're more technological, or if you have more questions on pricing, feel free to fill them out or send an email in, and then we'll be able to dive into that. So we'll be looking at your questions again in just a minute here. But first, I wanted to tell you about the promotion that we're doing for webinar attendees. We are actually going to be, if you guys are interested in streaming and you want to get up and going, we're going to be giving you a follow-up email. You can fill out a form, and then we will get you your custom details about your discount. So keep an eye out for that email. This is going to be only for you guys, and then we'll be following up shortly so that you guys can get the best price and even a special promotion on top of that for ShareFaith streaming, and we're happy to do that. So let's see. Have any more questions come in? It looks like some have come in that we've already talked about. All right. Let's maybe just wrap up by doing a quick summary of, I'm looking at some of the questions that have been emailed in here, and I think we've already touched on them either in the webinar or or during some of the question and answer time. So I'm just going to do a quick little summary of everything that will hopefully touch on those questions that have been asked again. Really, what we've tried to do is simplify live streaming for churches through this little box. So if somebody says, okay, what does it look like? And they didn't attend this webinar, and maybe they're the decision maker or they're the elder board and you have to present to them, this is how I would answer the question. ShareFaith has partnered with a company called Churches live stream for 5 years, and everything runs through a little piece of hardware that you can fit in your hand. You plug in your soundboard, you plug in your camera, you plug in the internet, and then it's unlimited streaming, not only live but after the fact. They take care of all the storage, they take care of all the training and support, and they've even given us a couple features that'll maximize the impact through social media channels and everything like that. So that's my quick 1-minute summary. It's really not more complicated than that. If you guys have more questions that come up, oftentimes we hear from people after webinars because they think, oh man, I should have asked that during the webinar. I didn't think of it until 5 minutes after the webinar ended. We want to be a personal resource for you. So feel free to let us know if you'd like a one-on-one consultation where we can hop on the line and talk about your church specifically, or even if you just want to email in a checklist of questions, we'd be happy to answer that as well. But overall, we are just so grateful for the time that you've spent with us. The bottom line when it comes to live video streaming in churches, let's forget the technology for a second. The reality is that we have truly gone around the world with ShareFaith churches that have poured their heart into their ministries, into the preaching of the word and the ministry of the church, and that has had a global impact. And really, you guys will be able to go to quite a number of places as well, exciting places perhaps that you've never even considered, through a video ministry in our video culture here in 2018. So thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. We are happy to continue the conversation if any other questions come up. And again, don't forget to go to your local library or to your cousin's bookshelf and pick up that copy of Other Places You'll Go. It's a great book. We'll be with you again here down the line with another webinar on streaming. We'll be in touch, and we are so grateful to have spent this time with you. So thanks again, and God bless you guys.
Thank you.